Let's dive right into this explainer by looking at two incredibly tart, highly beneficial fruits whose trajectories through history honestly couldn't be more different. On one hand, we've got a celebrated hero of the American harvest, and on the other, a shunned outlaw that was quite literally erased from the landscape. It's this fascinating story of botany, big business, and how our food systems are shaped by forces well outside of the kitchen.
So why on earth did the US government wage war on a berry? Now, what's really interesting about this question is that while we celebrate one of these berries every single holiday season, the other was literally eradicated by federal agents. Just imagine a fruit so controversial that the government sent the Civilian Conservation Corps into the wild to systematically uproot and destroy it. It sounds like science fiction, right? But this happened right here in the United States.
We're going to compare the beloved Thanksgiving staple, our native cranberry, with the forgotten outlaw, the imported European gooseberry, just to see how biology and big business completely shaped our diets. The cranberry is one of only 3 fruits actually native to North America, and it grows low to the ground in sandy bogs. The gooseberry, on the other hand, was brought over by European settlers and grows on these incredibly resilient, spiky bushes.
Let's move into Section 1, Native Roots versus Global Fruits.
Okay, so before European settlers gave the cranberry its bird-like name, literally calling it a craneberry, because those swept-back pink flower petals look exactly like the distinct beak of a crane, Native Americans like the Wampanoag and Algonquin had been using this native fruit for generations. They called it sasamenish or ibimi. And they didn't just eat it. They used the dark red juice as a dye for rugs and clothing, and even utilized its anti-inflammatory properties as a medicine to treat arrow wounds and fevers.
Now, to clear up some major botanical confusion on the other side of our story, what exactly is a gooseberry? Well, the classic European gooseberry is totally different from the Chinese gooseberry, which, fun fact, is what we know today as the kiwi fruit. It's also completely unrelated to the Cape gooseberry, which is actually a physalis originating from the South American Andes. Our outlaw today is the classic European variety, which is a fuzzy, grape-like fruit with little flower remnants on the end.
Moving on to Section 2, Pemmican and Pine Blister Rusts.
This brings us to a crucial point in our story, how human intervention completely altered the destiny of both of these berries. Indigenous communities brilliantly utilized the cranberry's exceptionally high acidity to preserve pemmican. You guys, this was basically the original energy bar. By mixing dried cranberries with ground deer meat and rendered animal fat, or tallow, they created this nutrient-dense, high-protein survival food that lasted for months without spoiling. The cranberry's unique chemical makeup literally fueled early travel and survival across North America.
Conversely, the tragic saga of the gooseberry started off pretty smoothly. Introduced in 1629, it grew in popularity until it hit a peak of 7,000 cultivated acres around 1899. But then, disaster struck. The booming timber industry discovered a disease called white pine blister rust was ruining their highly profitable lumber yields. They figured out that the gooseberry plant acted as an intermediary host for this rust, so through a massive concentrated corporate lobbying campaign, the timber industry convinced the federal government to enact a nationwide ban in 1911. Growing gooseberries became entirely illegal and wild plants were eradicated. It wasn't until 1966 that the federal ban was finally lifted, but by then, generations of Americans had entirely forgotten about this wonderful fruit.
That brings us to Section 3, Bogs, Bees, and Botany. Let's just bust a major myth right off the bat. Cranberries do not grow underwater. I know, it's crazy. Rather, farmers use a highly precise closed-circuit flooding cycle. In the winter, they flood the sandy bogs so a thick layer of ice insulates the dormant vines from harsh frosts. In the spring, they drain the water so commercial bees can come in and pollinate the pink blooms. Finally, in the fall, they flood the bogs one more time. This allows farmers to drive threshers right through the water, knocking the ripe berries off their vines so they float to the surface for an incredibly efficient harvest.
And you might be wondering, why exactly does that fall flooding technique work? Well, it's because every single cranberry has exactly 4 tiny air chambers inside its crisp white interior. Actually, a lot of people don't know the inside of a cranberry is totally white. kind of like an apple. The red color is literally just skin deep. Anyway, those 4 air pockets act like little life preservers, allowing the berry to bounce when it's fresh and perfectly float to the water's surface to be collected.
In sharp contrast to those floating red bogs of the cranberry, the European gooseberry grows on incredibly hardy bushes armed with sharp thorns. These twisted, knobbly branches naturally protect the fuzzy, grape-like green and red fruits. You definitely have to be careful when picking them. They're incredibly tart when picked green, which actually makes them perfect for cooking. But they develop these lovely, complex sugars if you leave them to fully ripen on the bush.
All right, our final section, Section 4, Myths, Medicine, and Menus.
So, while cranberries are absolutely packed with disease-fighting antioxidants, outranking almost every other fruit and veg out there, we really need to bust a persistent medical myth. Drinking sugary cranberry juice will not cure an active urinary tract infection. If you've got an active infection, you definitely need to see a healthcare professional, likely for antibiotics. However, the medical fact is that consuming cranberries may help reduce the risk of recurrent infections for some people. Both of these berries are notoriously tart and acidic, but as this famous quote from author Anton Chekhov illustrates, country life is just better with gooseberries. Once you learn to properly sweeten and cook them, they become an absolute delight. Gooseberries are packed with vitamin C, fiber, and phytonutrients that protect brain and heart health. When you balance that natural tartness, the culinary results are honestly amazing.
Because of that tartness, both berries have incredible culinary versatility. We all know cranberries are famous for cutting through the richness of Thanksgiving turkey in a classic sauce, or being dried into sweet snacks, and of course acting as the crucial acid in indigenous pemmican. But look at the outlaw. Gooseberries make incredible jammy puff pastry galettes. They can be honey roasted and served over whipped ricotta on toast. You can even use them in savory applications, like grilling up gooseberry BBQ skewers. I mean, they are a chef's dream ingredient.
So, as you think about the beloved native cranberry floating in its autumn bog, and the outlawed European gooseberries slowly making its long-awaited return to small farms, I want to leave you with this question to chew on. What other incredible, forgotten foods are we missing out on because of historical quirks and corporate lobbying? The next time you visit a local farmer's market, keep an eye out for the odd, the thorny, and the forgotten. You might just discover your new favorite food. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.